everyone, welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. Today's tutorial has been a highly requested tutorial for months. You guys have been screaming for a backpack tutorial. So for the OklaRoots YouTube channel, first backpack tutorial, we're working with the pattern, the Trailblazer by Bagstock Designs. Oh my goodness, I cannot even handle this bag. All right, I don't even know where to start. Where are we gonna start? So first of all, this design is from Bagstock Designs, and they are one of my favorite pattern writers because she keeps it simple. It's all rectangles. There's nothing crazy about this bag. I wouldn't call it a beginner level bag purely because of the amount of equipment that you probably want to have to make this bag, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. And then also because this is big and it can be heavy at your sewing machine. So you're going to need to, stretch out those arm muscles a little bit because you're going to be working those arms. But a beginner who really wants to make this bag can definitely make this bag. All right, so this is the front of the bag. For this bag, I posted this on social media and so many of you guys thought this light blue here was vinyl. It's not vinyl. This is waterproof canvas. I'm going to get a close look. And it is just beautiful. I love the idea of these solid waterproof canvas panels with these vibrant prints. It just mixes it up so nice. All right, so I will have links for all of this down in the description. The fabric I used for the contrast today, this is by Anna Maria Horner. This is part of her latest line, Hindsight. It can be a little bit tricky to find. If I can find it, I will link to it down in the description. The waterproof canvas, I will have a link for that. All of the zippers are from Sally Tomato. Many of these fun little, look at that Disney cap. These fun zipper pulls are from Wizardry Stitchery, and then all of the hardware is from Emmeline Bags. Okay, let's go into the bag. So in the front, you have this magnetic flap with a slip pocket, okay? Then you also have a zip pocket right here that's actually in the flap. So pencils, ID card, basic things you need to get in and out of quickly. There you go. On the sides, we have these beautiful extending side pocket panels so we can put water in there. On the back, we have our backpack straps, which come undone. And if you see, we have these D-rings on the side. So then you can switch it and make this a shoulder bag. On the back, we have our D-ring holders on the bottom sides and on the top. We have a zip pocket with a slip pocket, and this slip pocket, if you just didn't attach it to the bottom here, this can be a trolley slip so that you can put it on your suitcase and hold it on your suitcase. You know what I'm talking about when you're traveling. Then on the top, we have a nice big zipper. It actually has a zipper end. So nice and big opening. We have a zipper pocket on one side. We have a double slip pocket on the other. So many pockets on this beautiful bag. Oh, this is a really fun design, a really fun backpack. But besides just the structure of the backpack, the way she lays out the contrasting material with your exterior material, it just pops, doesn't that? I mean, that's such a beautiful bag. This is a bag that if you saw in a store, you would probably buy. So let's show what it looks like on. Okay, so the straps are 1-inch wide straps. So if you're making this for somebody who's going to be carrying a lot of heavy books, you know what I'm talking about, those college kids that are taking 24 hours in a semester and actually going to the university, but they have to carry a lot of books, I would beef up the straps, which would mean changing the hardware. I would beef them up to 1.5-inch wide straps and 1.5-inch wide hardware. If you're somebody who's worked with bags like this at a more intermediate level, you know the measurements and how to change that, but that's really the only change I would make for a beefier backpack. So here's what it's like in the front. Here's the side. Here's the back. It's super cute. It's a great mom backpack. It's a great teenager backpack. It's a great elementary age backpack. It's such a great design, such a great size. So many of you guys are like me right now where you're trying to get creative on where you work, where you do life. So let's just try this out. Here's my backpack. I'm going to open up the top. I have a clipboard. Fits fine in there. This is my day planner. So let's stick that in there. Also fine. Here is my laptop. I don't remember the size of this laptop, but I will have it written down here on the video so you can see. This is a smaller laptop. but there's plenty of room for a bigger laptop in here. So let's close up that top. Now here is a child's water bottle. We'll stick that on the side. Oh yeah. See, water bottle, all my basic things that I would use really going out and about. Let's try it on. I mean, this isn't heavy stuff. This is heavy stuff in here. But this is stuff that I carry around a lot with me when I'm trying to kind of, again, do life outside of my house, but obviously not in a work environment. Yep, and it fits perfectly. Man, you guys, this is a good backpack. I love this backpack. So if you haven't already subscribed to the YouTube channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, any shout outs, anything you want to say at all, just leave them in the comment section of this video. Don't forget that at the very top of the comment section will be a comment from me with all of the timestamps for this. Now, this is going to be a longer video, guys, because there's a lot going on. Make sure you utilize those timestamps if you're using this bag while you're working on it. You don't have to start at the beginning every time. Just go where you need to. All right, let's get started. So for the exterior of your bag, you're going to need 1 yard of fabric. You can use quilt cotton here. You can use vinyl. I'm choosing to use waterproof canvas. I really like waterproof canvas because I don't have to interface it. And it's durable, but it's not hard to sew through. Next, you're going to need a 1/2 yard of contrasting fabric. This is going to be kind of like the accent on the bag. So today I'm actually going to be working with a panel, and I'll just use the remnants from the panel for the rest of the contrasting fabric. For the lining of the bag, you're going to need 1 1/4 yard, and I'm going to be using quilt weight cotton today. You're going to need 3 yards of fusible woven interfacing. I will be using Woven Fuse. You're going to need 1 1/4 yards of sew-in foam interfacing. I get mine from By Annie. It's soft and stable. The pattern calls for a small cut of fusible stiff stabilizer. I'll be using Decoville Heavy today. You could also use Pellon Peltex 71F. You're going to need a small scrap, about a 4 to 4.5 inch piece of Decoville Light. The pattern calls for 4 zippers, 2 number 4.5 zippers, and 2 number 3 all-purpose zippers. You can really mix this up. You could use all 4.5 zippers, but I would make sure that the exterior zippers are not these small number 3 zippers. So for my zippers today, I'm just going to be using zipper tape. This is from Sally Tomato. And for the interior of the bag, I will use a smaller zipper from Zip It. So this bag uses quite a bit of hardware. You're going to need 2 1-inch sliders, 5 1-inch D-rings, and 4 1-inch swivel hooks. All of my hardware here is from Emmeline Bags. You're going to need 2 14mm magnetic snaps, 1 zipper end, 15 rivets, size 9. I get my rivets from Emmeline Bags. Also optional are some purse feet. You'll need 6 of those, and I have a couple different zipper pulls I'll be playing with today. The zipper pulls are from Wizardry Stitchery. I'll have links for all of these down in the description of the video. So here's some of the other stuff you're going to need for the bag. Today I'll be using this Gutermann thread. I'll be using a Microtex 8012 needle to help with holding everything in place. You can use this Beacon 3-in-1 glue. I have 2 different types of double-sided tape here. This smaller one is the Dritz Wash Away, and this larger one is a leather double-sided tape. They're both 1/4 inch wide. I have my seam ripper as always, 2 marking tools, one that can mark on darker fabric and one that can mark on lighter fabric, and then a scrap piece of fusible fleece for help with installation of the magnetic snaps. Also, don't forget your clips, your pins, and if you have a label for your bag, make sure you put that to the side now. So there are a lot of pieces to this bag. We're not going to run through all of them right now, but I just want to make note that some of these pieces do have alternate size woven interfacing cuts to the fabric cuts. For example, the front slip pocket panel, the side pocket panel, and the back slip pocket panel. They all have pattern pieces that are going to have you use a larger cut for your fabric, but then fold on that dash line to cut your interfacing. This is your woven interfacing. If you want to have a print stand out in the front of the backpack, we're using the front slip pocket panel to do that. As you can see, I centered my design in the middle and then I spaced it down with about 4 inches above the design. This is to allow the flap to go over the bag without covering it. I'm not certain this is a perfect centering of it, but we'll find out as we go. From your foam cuts, you're going to need a cut of the bottom fabric, 2 of the side panels, and 2 of the lining panels. On the lining panel template, it does tell you you need 2 foam interfacing cuts there, but on the lining panel little square label, it doesn't include the foam, so just don't forget
The lining panel, you're going to need 2 foam cuts of that for the exterior of your bag. So when you fuse your woven interfacing to the front slip pocket panel and the back slip pocket panels, you're going to fuse it in the center, leaving the edges unfused. This is going to help reduce bulk in the bag. This is going to go the same with your side pocket panels. See, you fuse it along the longer edge, but then leave the sides and the shorter edge unfused. If you're using waterproof canvas like I am, you don't need to do any sort of woven interfacing on any of your waterproof canvas pieces. So grab your exterior bottom panel and your exterior bottom panel stabilizer. And we're going to fuse the stabilizer onto the back of your exterior bottom panel. So if you're using Decoville Heavy, there's a shiny side, just lay that down, center it as best you can, flip it over, and fuse it from the right side of the exterior fabric. If you have purse feet that you want to install, now's the time to do it. For placement, I like to measure 1.5 inches from the long edges of the exterior bottom panel and draw a line. And then I draw 3 more lines that are all 3 inches apart. So 3 inches from one edge, and then another 3 inches. So you should have a grid that looks like this. And at every intersecting point for our lines, that's where I install the purse feet. I'm not going to be installing purse feet today, but if you are, this is a great way to set up your purse feet. So now grab your foam piece for the bottom panel and lay it to the wrong side of your bottom panel. And then go ahead and clip this foam piece to your exterior fabric. Now we can take this to the sewing machine and we can baste the foam onto our exterior piece using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. When basting on the foam, it's easiest if you lay your fabric down so that the exterior is right side up. Once you have the foam basted on, you can go ahead and put this to the side. Next, we're going to work on our connector straps and stabilizer. So you're going to grab one of your connector straps that has the woven interfacing already fused on and one of your connector stabilizers. So for me, this is Pellon Decoville Light. All you have to do is center this on your connector strap. I like to fuse this down from the back of the Decoville Light. So just grab a scrap piece of fabric and lay that over the back of the stabilizer and the fabric. Press your iron over that scrap piece for just a second, and then flip it over and fuse it from the front of the exterior fabric. You're going to repeat this process for all 5 of your connector straps. So now let's work on our bag straps. We'll work with the longer straps first, so put the shorter straps to the side. I'm using waterproof canvas for my longer straps, so I don't really need to press this. I'm just going to flip it so that it's the wrong side up on both straps. Grab a ruler and a marking tool and mark a line that is halfway down the length of the strap. So 2 inches from the longer edges, just draw that midpoint line along the entire strap. Once you have this midpoint line marked on both of your longer straps, you're going to fold those long edges, wrong sides together, up to meet that midpoint line. And then if you're using quilt cotton, you can just press this with an iron. If you're using vinyl, you can use clips like I am. Once you have one side clipped down, go ahead and repeat that process for the other side. So once you have this clipped, if you're using quilt cotton or waterproof canvas like I am, you're going to want to enclose these edges. If you're using vinyl, you don't need to do this, but we don't want to leave these raw edges here. So just unclip right next to that short edge. Open up your folds and fold down this short edge, wrong sides together, anywhere between 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch, whatever you're comfortable with. I like to go a little bit wider than necessary. Grab a couple clips to hold down or use your iron to press. And now we're just going to refold our tube just like we already had. So fold down those long edges back. And you can see this way our short edges are completely enclosed. Now go ahead and repeat that process for the other short edge. And then once you have all of your raw edges pinned and tucked into the center of your strap, we're just going to fold the entire strap in half and include all of the folded edges in each other's clips. Once you have one strap completely clipped, go ahead and repeat that process for your other long strap. So once you have both of your long straps clipped, you can go ahead and set these to the side. And while we're here, why don't we go ahead and do the same thing for our short straps. So you can see with my short straps, I'm actually using quilt cotton, so I can press these instead of clipping them. With the short straps, you don't need to enclose the shorter ends. You just need to enclose the longer ends. So just fold your short straps with the long edges, wrong sides together. And this is only if you're using quilt cotton. If you're using vinyl or the waterproof canvas, you can use the same method we used for the longer straps, where we just mark the line and use clips. So once you have all of your straps pinned, for the longer straps, you're going to take these to the sewing machine and sew along all four edges, the long edges and the short edges that we enclosed, at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. For the shorter straps, you're just going to sew along the longer edges at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you have all of your straps top stitched, you can go ahead and set these to the side. So now we're going to work on the connectors and the D-rings. So grab all of your strap connectors, and what you can do is mark a line going down the center of the connector. Once you have the center lines marked, you're going to fold your raw edges up to meet that center line, wrong sides together, and just use your iron to press these down if you're using quilt cotton. Otherwise, use clips. So once you have the raw edges pressed towards the back of the strap, we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along the long edges of each one of our connectors at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So we're going to work on our connectors in a set of 3 and then a set of 2. So grab 3 of your connector straps and 3 of your D-rings. As you can see, I didn't have enough of this gunmetal D-ring, so I'm going to be using a rainbow D-ring for the very top of the backpack. So for these, you're going to grab your D-ring and grab your strap and slide your strap in so that the raw folded edges are against the flat part of the strap facing down. And then just pinch those wrong sides together, just like this. And you can put a clip on this for now. Do this for the other 2 D-rings. So we're hiding all of our raw edges. So there you go. You can go ahead and set these to the side. For your remaining 2 straps, go ahead and fold them in half with the short edges together, just like this. We're just trying to crease that midpoint mark. Now grab one of your D-rings, slide your strap connector with the wrong sides against the flat side, just like this, and fold down that short edge to meet your creased midpoint mark. So your strap connector should look just like this. Grab the remaining raw edge and fold that up to meet the other short edge so that you have right side out and wrong sides together. Do this for the other D-ring and strap connector. And these 2 strap connectors are going to go on the side of the bag. So if you want to use your backpack as a crossbody or a shoulder strap bag, you can use these ones for that. So now we're going to take all of these to the sewing machine, and using a zipper foot, we're just going to sew a row of stitches right against that flat bar of our D-ring just to hold this in place. For these, you're going to probably leave the clips on them. We'll address closing this entirely in a future step. Once you have all of your D-rings top stitched, you can go ahead and lay these to the side. So grab one of your exterior top panels and one of your short straps. And we're going to go ahead and find the midpoint on the bottom of our exterior top panel. So if you're using a directional fabric, make sure you mark where the bottom is. I like to use scissors to just cut off the tiniest little triangle, and that gives me a nice little mark for my midpoint. And you're going to measure 2 inches from that midpoint on each side. So line up your ruler. So what you can do is just make a mark to make this easier. So measure 2 inches over, make a mark, do the same on the other side. Now grab your strap and line up your strap so that the interior of the strap goes right against that mark. Clip one side down. Make sure your strap is nice and straight. As you pull it over and do the same on the other side, the interior of the strap is going to go right against that mark and clip it down. All right, so what I like to do is make sure my strap is straight. So I use the grid marks on my cutting mat to line up my strap. My strap is 1 inch wide, so I'll line it up with the grid marks on my cutting mat, and then I'll take it up to match the grid marks above that front exterior panel. And then I will just clip that down as well. Do the same on the other side. So again, just lining this up in those 1 inch marks and lining it up with the top of the panel as well. So now grab a small ruler and we're going to measure 1.5 inches up from the bottom of our front panel. And I just use a chalk pencil and mark a line going across. You can remove this clip here and measure it this way so you have a nice straight line. We're just marking where our stopping point is going to be for our top stitching because we're going to go sew down this strap. Do the same on the other side. 1.5 inches from the bottom edge. Mark a line. I wouldn't use any sort of pen or marker here. I would just use chalk. Okay, so now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to baste on the edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Then we're going to trace our top stitching along our front strap and go over that marked line. So we're creating a nice little rectangle here. After we've created that outer rectangle on both straps, we're going to create a second rectangle on the inside. So 1/8 of an inch in from your top stitching on all 4 sides, just do another rectangle there. If you're not great at top stitching and keeping all of your lines straight, use a thread that matches your strap. So obviously I'm using a dark thread. You are going to see all of the imperfections. If I wanted to hide that, I would use a light blue or a white colored thread here. All right, once you have one strap attached, you're just going to go ahead and repeat this exact same process for the other exterior top panel and short strap. So once you have the straps attached to both of your top front panels, pick one of these panels to be the back, and this is going to hold the anchor for the backpack. So grab one of your anchors that has the 2 raw edges on the bottom. Like I said, I'm going to be using this rainbow one for my top of my backpack, and just center your strap connector with that center marking on your panel and clip in place. And now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to make these 2 rectangles on this strap connector here. We're just going to trace those top stitching marks first and then make another rectangle on the inside. There you go. And like I said, coordinating thread would be your friend right here. So you can go ahead and set these 2 panels to the side. Now we're going to work on the flap. Grab your exterior and lining flap panels. Working with your lining flap panel, turn it right side down. grab the template for the front flap panel and using either a pencil or a stiletto, poke a hole in the center of the magnetic marks and just lay this down over the back of your flap panel. You can use a pen or a pencil and just mark inside those holes for the magnetic snaps. So we're going to be working with the male ends today. Grab both of your male snaps and grab 2 washers. And all you have to do is take a washer and put the center circle over that dot you marked and then draw vertical lines in the long oval slits. Grab a seam ripper and just rip that line. It's better for your rip to be a little bit too short rather than too long. Since this is so thin, we should beef it up just a little bit. Grab some felt, fusible fleece, anything that has a little bit of a cushion to it. And just use your washers to mark those same lines just so you can cut the same size slits. So now take one of your male snaps and from the right side, insert it into those slits. And then grab whatever material you're using to beef it up and put that over those slits as well. Grab a washer, put the washer over all of that, and pull down the tabs. Do the same on the other side. And to protect the other side of the fabric, grab some scraps from your woven interfacing and just cut off small pieces. And we're just going to fuse this on to the back. You could also use fusible fleece here. You just want to cover up these tabs on the back of your snap so that they don't rub against the other fabric. Grab your front flap zipper pocket lining panel and lay it right side down. So mark the midpoint at the top of the pocket panel. Take your ruler and we're going to measure 7/8 of an inch down from that top long edge. And now we want a rectangle that is 7.5 inches wide and centered. So we're going to measure 3 3/4 inch away from that center marking. And you're just going to draw a horizontal line on each side. And now just measure your rectangle and make sure it measures up to the same dimensions that are given in the pattern. Grab your exterior flap and mark the midpoint along that top straight edge. Take your flat pocket panel and lay it right side down, matching up those midpoint marks. And then just lay it right sides together along that straight edge. Go ahead and clip in place. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along these lines we marked for this rectangle. Don't worry about these lines on the side. We're just doing this inner rectangle right here. Leave the raw edge unsewn. Once you have this stitched on, measure 1/2 inch into the rectangle on that top straight edge on both sides. And then use your ruler to mark a line from the corner of your stitching all the way up to that mark that you just made. Do the same on the other side. Now take your scissors and very carefully cut along that marked line all the way to the corner of your stitching, but don't cut your stitching. Do the same on the other side. So now we're going to flip this all around so that the wrong sides of our flap and our lining panel are touching. Now this may seem a little crazy, but watch. If you flip it back and then flip these triangles out, you'll end up with this really cool open rectangle on the top of your panel, and then we're just going to give this a good press to hold it all in place. So manipulate it with your hands as much as possible first. You can start in the middle and then press it down with your iron. I like to do the long center section first, and then I'll work on the sides. So the sides you just push out and keep them nice and straight. If you find that you have one corner that's just puckering a little too much, flip it back out, grab your scissors, and just cut a little bit closer to the stitching. And you see just that tiny, tiny bit that I cut. I mean, it was almost nothing, but it does help. Since I'm using waterproof canvas, I do like to add a few clips to really help hold it all together. The iron does help quite a bit. So if you're using zipper tape, now's the time to cut off a section. If you're not, you're using your 8-inch number 4.5 handbag zipper. Since I'm using zipper tape, I like to make it a little bit longer than 8 inches, so I'm going to cut it to about 9.5 inches. The Sally Tomato zipper tape comes with a lot of zipper pulls, but I have a fun little Mickey zipper pull that I want to use. This pocket is one of the most noticeable pockets on the bag, so if you have a fun zipper pull, this is definitely the pocket to use it on. If you're using zipper tape, you're more than welcome to take this to the sewing machine and just sew a couple of stitches over the ends so that your zipper pull doesn't fly off at any point. If you want to live dangerously, then leave it open like I do. So take your zipper and lay it right side up. And when the zipper pull closes, it should be on the left. So when it's open, it goes to the right. As it closes, it goes to the left. Take your flap with the flap exterior right side up and then just lay it over that zipper pull. And what we're going to do is we're going to match up the top edges of our zipper tape with the top edge of the exterior flap. Now, if clips are enough for you, then you can take this to the sewing machine. Otherwise, we can add some double-sided tape before we finish this. So take your double-sided tape and all you have to do is lay it along the bottom edge of your zipper, right on that edge away from the zipper teeth. We don't want this to be seen in the end. So now when you lay your flap over, you'll line up those top edges again and then just push it along that tape on the bottom. Now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch along this inner rectangle right here on the exterior flap at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So before we move on, just turn this over and make sure that your zipper tape was caught in your stitching. If you're using a skinnier zipper, it's possible that it didn't catch it, so you're going to want to make sure you double check that right now. If your zipper tape is a little long, you can trim it down. Now, with the lining side right side up, take your lining and fold it right side down along that top edge, meeting the other corners of your lining. And then just pin along that top edge, lining it up with that zipper tape. Okay, so now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along the 2 vertical edges of this lining pocket. What you want to do is make sure you don't include this exterior flap. So if you have it clipped to it, unclip it, adjust, and keep it just like this. We don't want to be sewing on the exterior fabric here. We're going to sew down these 2 lining seams at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once you top stitch around this rectangle, then you can go ahead and just baste the zipper on to the top with the lining. So now grab your lining flap panel and lay that right side down against the exterior flap panel, and then just clip all of the edges together. Now take this to the sewing machine and sew these together at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you leave the straight edge up top completely unsewn. Once you have these stitched together, you can go ahead and trim down your seam allowance to 1/4 of an inch. I like to cut just a few little slits right around these curves just to make sure they lay flat. The thinner seam allowance is going to help with that though. Now turn your flap right side out through that opening up top and push out the seam so it's nice and rounded. So after you push out those seams, just give it a good press with your iron. Once you have this pressed flat, we're going to top stitch around that folded edge and then also base stitch along the top straight edge to have this all pieced together nicely. You can go ahead and put this to the side just for a moment. So now you're going to grab your exterior front slip pocket. So for us, that's this design right here. Use the front slip pocket panel pattern piece to help you mark the location of the snaps. So I just cut a hole in the paper and then I just run my marker through that hole. We're doing this on the wrong side of our front pocket. And now we're going to install the female ends of our snap just like we did with the male ends. So now your snap should be installed. We're going to go ahead and add a couple pieces of scrap woven interfacing on the back side of these just like we did with the male ends. Grab your front slip pocket panel lining and lay that right side down, right sides together with the exterior. And then just clip along that top edge. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Once you have this stitched, we're going to flip these so that they're wrong sides together. I like to press the seam first and then flip it up and give it a finger press. Press it again and then press them down wrong sides together. Now make sure all of your edges are matching up, and we're going to take this back to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch along this folded edge at an 1/8 inch seam allowance and then just baste down the other 3 edges at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Now grab one of your exterior bottom panels and lay this front slip pocket over it so that the vertical edges are matched up and you match up the bottom horizontal edge. It should look just like this. Now we can clip our slip pocket to our bottom panel, and we're going to take this to the sewing machine and baste along our 3 clipped edges at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Alright, this is my favorite part. I just think this slip pocket is so cute. So now grab your flap and take your magnetic snaps and just attach them together. And if you measured everything correctly, the top of your flap and the top of this bottom panel should be matched up perfectly. And this just gives you such a cute idea of what your backpack's going to look like. Oh, I love it. So I see that the spacing worked out really well with the flap. I'm not so sure about the bottom with the seams, but we'll worry about that when we get there. So let's just clip these 2 edges together. And now we can baste this clipped edge together at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. So now grab one of your exterior middle panels and lay this right side down along that edge that we just basted together. Now take this to the sewing machine and sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. You're going to want to use your zipper foot here. Once you have this middle panel attached, you can go ahead and fold your middle panel up so that the seam is behind that middle panel. You can give this a quick press if you'd like. Now let's go back to the sewing machine and let's just top stitch along the middle panel right next to the seam at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. So now grab the exterior top panel that does not have that bag connector and lay this right side down along the top raw edge of that middle exterior contrasting piece and clip in place. And whenever I'm trying to keep things straight, I'll often clip the sides as well, just to make sure nothing shifts around on me. Now we're going to take this one to the sewing machine and sew along that clipped edge up top at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Alright, once you have that stitched down, we're going to press this seam behind that middle panel, just like we did on the bottom. So both of the seams are going behind the middle panel. This makes it much easier because the seam where the strap is really not going to fold for you. Now we can go back to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch along this middle panel on the seam we just sewed at an 1/8 inch seam allowance. And there you go. This is your exterior front panel. Isn't that just so cute with the slip pocket and the flat pocket? Such a cute bag. You can go ahead and put this to the side. Now we're going to work on the exterior back panel. So grab the back slip pocket exterior panel and lay that right side down. From the top longer edge, draw a line that is 1 3/4 inch down. Draw a second line below that, that's 3/8 inch down from that first line. If you haven't already, make sure you mark the midpoint along the top of this panel. And now measure 4.5 inches away from that midpoint on each side to create a 9-inch wide rectangle. Now mark a line that is halfway between the two parallel horizontal lines, and then draw a triangle that's about 3/8 of an inch in. You can just eyeball this, connecting on that center line. So now lay this right side up. Grab your back zipper pocket lining panel, and we want to find the midpoint along the shorter of the edges. And now we're going to lay our lining panel right side down against the exterior. You want this panel to go down 3/4 of an inch from the top and have it centered on the midpoint of your exterior panel. So I like to line up my ruler so one of the inch markings is right against that midpoint mark on my exterior panel. I have it 3/4 of an inch down. So all I have to do is take my midpoint for my lining panel, match it up with that inch mark, and then rest it against my ruler. And now I know that it is covering that rectangle on the back and it's centered. Grab some pins and just put a few pins in this to hold it all in place. So now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along this inner rectangle following the guidelines. Make sure you're going through the exterior and the lining and you're not hitting any of your pins. All right, once you have your lines stitched down, you can go ahead and remove your pins. So now grab a seam ripper and start seam ripping that center line that you marked. Just rip it enough so you can use your scissors to cut the rest. Cut along that line until you get to the tip of that triangle. And then just cut along the angles of the triangle all the way to the stitching, getting as close as you can without actually cutting those stitches. Repeat this step for the other side of the rectangle. Once you have this cut open, you can take your lining panel and just stick it through so that you have the wrong side of the lining panel against the wrong side of the exterior panel. And I like to work with the exterior wrong side up, and then I just pull the shorter edge of the flap first and use my fingers to finger press it, and then I'll press it with the iron. Make sure you press and check the front as well in case your lining panel is peeking out just a little bit too much through that rectangle. You can roll it and adjust it. Now, if you're going to be using zipper tape for this, I suggest cutting about a 10-inch piece of zipper tape off. You can add your zipper pull of choice here. If you'd like, you can go ahead and stitch down the ends of your zipper pull. I'm going to leave them unstitched. Now, first I'm going to add my double-sided tape to the outer edges of my zipper. Now you want to get this on the edge of your zipper tape as far as you can from the zipper teeth so we don't see the tape in the end. Go ahead and remove the paper from the tape and take your zipper right side up, and when the zipper's closed, the zipper pull should be on the left. Now grab your exterior panel that you're working on right side up, and we're just going to lay this over that zipper so that it fits in the center of that open rectangle. And just go down slowly, adding it to your tape. Make sure your zipper pull is inside this rectangle. And if you need to adjust it, go ahead and adjust it. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch along this rectangle at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Alright, once you have that top stitch done, go ahead and lay this exterior side right side down so you have the lining side up. If you need to go ahead and trim your zipper tape, go ahead and do that now. Just make sure you don't trim your lining panels. Now take your lining pocket piece and fold it up so it's right sides together on the back of that zipper, and then just clip along these 3 edges. Now we're going to sew along all 3 clipped edges at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Make sure you move this exterior panel out of the way while you're sewing. We're only sewing the lining panel. So lay your back exterior slip pocket right side up. Take your lining for the back slip pocket and lay that right side down. And just match up all 4 edges and clip along the top and bottom long edges. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine and sew along these two clipped edges at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Now we can go ahead and turn this right side out, so just pull it through one of those openings. And now with it turned right side out, push out those seams so they're nice and straight. And we're going to press along the top and bottom seams that we just sewed. All right, and with this pocket, you have a couple different options. If you're going to be attaching this to the back of your backpack as a slip pocket, meaning this would be sewn down, then all you have to do here is top stitch along this top edge by the zipper and then base stitch the sides. However, you could also use this as a trolley sleeve, allowing the bag to go onto a suitcase handle and hold onto it like that. If you're going to be using it as a trolley sleeve, top stitch the bottom and the top edges and then base stitch the sides. So if you're using it as a slip pocket like I am today, all we're top stitching right now is this top edge and then we're basting the sides. So now grab your remaining exterior bottom panel and lay that right side up. And we're going to lay our pocket on top of this, laying it 1 inch from the top edge, making sure that the vertical edges are all lined up nicely on the side. Now we can just clip along the side edges. Now, if you're using this as a slip pocket, you're going to baste down the edges and top stitch along this bottom edge through the exterior and the contrasting pocket panel. If you're using this as a trolley sleeve, this should already be top stitched. Just leave that open and just baste down the vertical edges. So here we go. As you can see, I have the pocket attached. Take the remaining exterior middle panel and lay that right side down along the top edge of that bottom panel and clip in place. Now sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Once you have this sewn on, just go ahead and press this open so that the seam is behind that middle panel. Now we're going to go back to the sewing machine and top stitch along the middle panel at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Grab your remaining top panel, this should be the one with the D-ring attached, and lay it right side down against the top of that middle panel and then just clip in place. Now sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Once you have this stitched together, you're just going to press this open and press that seam behind that middle panel. So just make sure it's nice and taut and then just press it with your iron. Now take this back to the sewing machine and top stitch along the middle panel at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, your back panel is now complete. You can go ahead and put this to the side. Now we're going to work on the side pocket panels. So grab one of your lining panels and one of your exterior panels and lay them right sides together and clip along the top longer edge. Do this for the other pocket panel as well. Now we're going to sew along these clipped edges at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Once you have these sewn together, go ahead and press them open so that they are wrong sides together. Once you have these pressed wrong sides together, go back to the sewing machine and top stitch along the sewn edges at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Then base stitch around the other 3 edges to just hold these panel pieces together. So now we're going to attach these pocket pieces to the side panels. So grab one pocket and one side panel. Line up the bottom of your pocket with the bottom of your side panel. They should be the same length. And then just clip that together. Go ahead and repeat this step for the other side panel and pocket piece. Now take this to the sewing machine and just baste down these clipped edges at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you have the bottom basted on, we can now attach the sides. So just pull up the side of your pocket and twist it around so that it is right up against the side of your side panel. So the easiest way to do this is if you kind of hold it upright and pinch it. And I just start at the bottom and line up those edges and clip it up to the top, just like that. You're going to do the same on the other side. So pull it a little bit into the center of your side panel and then just clip it to hold it in place. You can see this creates a really nice pouch for the side of your bag. Go ahead and do this for the other side panel as well. Now we can take these to the sewing machine and just baste down these clipped edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Grab your remaining 2 D-rings that have the raw edges along the bottom just like this. And now we're going to cut these at an angle so that we can attach them to the bottom of our bag. So measure 1/2 of an inch up on one side of your D-ring connector. If you have a preference on how this looks, think about that now. I don't really mind either way. And then draw a line from the opposite raw edge corner to that mark on both of them. Now you can cut right along that line. Grab your back exterior panel, and you can see I added my bag tag on the center bottom of this one. I did that off camera. Take one of your D-rings with that slanted cut, and we want to line this up 1 inch from the bottom of the back exterior. So the bottom tip should go 1 inch from the bottom. I'm just using the grid marks on my cutting mat for this, and it should be pointing up towards the center of the bag. Once you have it lined up, just clip it in place. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. So the other side is going to go 1 inch from the bottom, and the point is going to go right at that mark, and it's going to be pointing up towards the center of the bag. These 2 bottom straps at the angle and this top one allows this to become a backpack. Now take these to the sewing machine and just baste these down at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So grab your exterior front panel and lay it right side down. Grab one of your foam panels for the lining, and we're just going to line it up on top of this front panel. You can do this from either side really. If your foam is a little bit longer than your panel, just try to even it out on the top and the bottom. That way it'll get included in the seam allowance. Now just clip around the entire panel, holding the front panel and the foam together. Now we're going to take this to the sewing machine, and we're just going to baste this on at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once you have the foam basted down for the front panel, just go ahead and repeat that step for the back panel. Once you have the front and back panels basted to the foam, you can go ahead and set these to the side. Now we're going to attach the foam to the side units. Before we do that, you want to pin these pockets so that they don't get eaten up in the stitches. So you can just pinch the top and fold it over, and then just clip along the top of the pocket. Grab one of your foam interfacings and lay your side panel right side up on top of it. And then just clip along the entire 4 edges. Repeat this with the other side panel. Now you can take these both to the sewing machine and baste down these 4 edges on each side panel at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once you have the foam attached, we can now add the remaining D-rings. To help with this, I'm going to use some of this double-sided leather tape. You could also use glue here or any other type of tape. I just cut a small enough piece to run down the center of my D-ring connector, but far enough from the edges that I'm not actually going to sew over it. This tape does have a tendency to gunk up the needle on my machine, so I try to avoid sewing over it. Now we're going to attach this D-ring 1.5 inches down from the center of our side panel. So if you need to, go ahead and mark the center of your side panel. Measure 1.5 inches down. If you're using the double-sided tape like I am, go ahead and remove that paper. And then just center it on your ruler. There you go. And step back and kind of look at it and make sure it looks straight and centered. Now go ahead and do the same with the other side panel. So now we're going to go and stitch this down at the sewing machine. I like to first stitch over that top stitching next to the D-ring, and then I'll do the bottom top stitching that goes parallel to that D-ring top stitching, and then I'll just trace these side stitches up to the top of the D-ring. Alright, once you have the D-rings attached, they should look just like this. So now it's time to attach rivets. I am using 9mm rivets. I have a 10mm rivet press and a hole punch on my Cam Snaps rivet press. You could definitely use Chicago screws here. You could just leave off the rivets entirely, but these rivets take this bag to the next level. So first let's grab the front panel, and we're going to attach one rivet in the center of each of these rectangles, holding our strap down. So I'm going to punch holes for all of these first, and then I'll attach the rivets. Now let's punch the holes on the back panel. We're going to do 3 here, 1 in each of these rectangles for the strap, and 1 in the center for the D-ring connector. And now the side connectors get 2 rivets, so one that is 1/2 inch from the bottom edge, and then the other one that's going to be 3/4 inch above that 1/2 inch mark you just made. Mark the same on the other one, and we'll just cut out the holes for these now. So now that we have the holes cut out, we can switch out to our press dies, and we can just attach the rivets in each one of those holes. Grab 2 rivets, one with the long pull and one with the short, and I just insert them in first and then press them. Here we go. Now let's add the rivets to the top back panel. Now let's do the side panels. Alright, once you have your rivets attached, you can go ahead and put your rivet press to the side, but don't put it away. We will be using it in a couple more steps. So now grab both of your interior zipper pocket panels and lay them right side down. So on the bottom edge of each of these zipper panels, just fold up the fabric about 1/4 inch, wrong sides together, and press. Once you have both of these bottom edges folded up, go ahead and put these to the side. Grab your lining panel and mark the center of the top edge and lay your lining panel right side down. Mark a horizontal line that is 2.5 inches from the top edge, and then mark a second parallel horizontal line that is 3/8 inch below that. We're going to create a rectangle here that is 8 inches wide, so measure 4 inches from the middle over on each side and mark 2 vertical lines. Now go ahead and mark a center line in this rectangle, and then draw your triangles extending out about 3/8 inch. Flip your lining panel right side up. Grab one of your pocket panels and find the midpoint of the top edge, so that's the edge that doesn't have the fold. And now we're going to measure 1.5 inches down from the top edge of the lining panel. Take your zipper pocket panel and lay that right side down, matching it up with that midpoint mark and laying it against your ruler so that it is straight and centered. Grab some pins and just pin this zipper pocket panel to your lining panel. Now we can flip this over, go to the sewing machine, and just sew along that inner rectangle. Okay, once you have that sewn, you can go ahead and remove the pins. Use your seam ripper to rip along that center line, and then cut along that center line, and then cut as close to the corner stitches as possible. Now take your pocket panel and flip it through that opening, and just use your fingers to press along those seams, and then use an iron to press it down Now grab your 8-inch number 3 zipper. You could also use zipper tape here. If you're using zipper tape, make sure it's about 9 inches long. Then just like before, we can add our double-sided tape. And then with the zipper laying right side up, just lay your lining pocket opening with the lining right side up and center that zipper in your rectangle. Make sure your zipper pull is inside of the rectangle. There you go. Now we can take this to the sewing machine and just top stitch around this rectangle at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Make sure you're using your zipper foot. After you have this stitched on, check the back and make sure the stitching is completely on the zipper tape. And then you can trim your zipper down if it's longer. Grab your other zipper pocket panel and lay that right side down over the other zipper pocket panel and clip all 4 edges together. Okay, now we can take this to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along just the zipper pocket panels at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. This is easiest if you sew it with the lining right side up and just move the lining out of the way as you go around. Make sure you do not sew this bottom folded edge. We're going to be using this later for turning the bag out. So backstitch really well right here because this is going to get a workout in a little bit. Take your interior slip pocket panel and lay it right side down and fold the short edges up to meet one another, wrong sides together. Go ahead and press down this fold so that the whole panel is nice and flat. Now we're going to top stitch along this fold at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you have that top stitch down, grab your remaining lining panel and lay your lining panel right side up. Lay your pocket panel on top of the right side of your lining panel with the top stitched edge in the middle and the raw edges along the bottom raw edge of your lining panel. And then just clip along the sides and the bottom to hold the pocket panel in place. Now grab your ruler and measure 6 inches in towards the pocket. Grab a chalk pen and just draw a vertical line over your pocket. Now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to baste along the side edges and the bottom edge. And then we're just going to top stitch over this marked center line. Make sure you backstitch well right here over the top of the pocket. So now let's finish up the exterior. Take your exterior side panels and lay them right side down. And draw a line that is 3/8 of an inch from the bottom of your panel. Do this on both side panels. So grab your back exterior panel, this is the one with all the D-rings on it, and lay it right side up. Grab one of your side exterior panels and lay that right side down, matching the top and the bottom and the side. Clip this along that vertical side. And now we're going to sew along this side at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you stop and backstitch well once you reach that marked line on the bottom of your side panel. Once you have one side attached, you're just going to repeat that with the other side panel. If you need to, go ahead and pinch that pocket for the side panel and clip it so that you don't have to worry about this pocket getting caught up in the seam. Also, make sure your D-rings are not folded down. Make sure they're pointing up towards the center of the panel. All right, so this should be where you're at. Before we attach the front panel, we're actually going to add some rivets to these bottom D-rings. Make a mark of where you want your rivet to be attached. And the rivet is going to go through the D-ring holder and the back panel. So first, go ahead and punch out the hole for this. Remember, it's going through the strap connector and through the back panel, not through the side panels. We can punch a hole for the other side as well. And just like we did before, go ahead and insert your rivets through those punched holes. And you can snap them in place before you set them. And then using your rivet press, just press these rivets down. Okay, so if you're using rivets, this is now where you should be. Now we can attach the front panel to these side panels. So just make sure your side panel and your front panel are right sides together and that the top of your front panel is with the top of the back panel. Just double check everything is lined up before you sew it together, and then clip along that edge. Now sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, once you have that attached, now you just have to attach the front panel to the remaining side panel, just like you did on the other side. And now sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you stop at your marked line on the bottom of your side panel. Okay, by now you can realize this bag is heavier and bigger than you thought it was going to be, but you got to finish it. Grab your bottom panel, and we're going to attach this long sides first. So take one of the long sides of your exterior bag and right sides together, pin them together. You shouldn't have a hard time getting this in those corners because we left that 3/8 of an inch gap when we were stitching down the sides. So now we're going to sew along this long pinned edge, and you're going to start and stop sewing 3/8 of an inch from the edge. These are just the stitches that you already made, so just start and stop at those stitches on the side. Alright, you should have that one long edge sewn on. Now flip over your bag, and we're going to sew on the other long edge in the exact same manner. You might find it difficult at the machine. The layers might be trying to slip apart from one another. That's just because the weight of the bag is pulling the bag away from the sewing machine. So you need to take your left hand and hold up that bag either from the side or from behind the sewing machine to keep everything straight. All right, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to start and stop 3/8 of an inch from the edges, and we're going to sew along this at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Alright, your two long edges should now be attached. Now we just have to do the same thing for the shorter edges. These should be a little bit easier to keep together since we have the opposite ends holding it in place. Just go ahead and clip along that edge. I'm going to clip along the other short edge as well. And just like we did with the longer edges, let's sew along this edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, starting and stopping 3/8 of an inch away from the edges. So once you have the bottom completely stitched, let's go ahead and turn this right side out. So what I'm checking when I turn this right side out is just to make sure that all of my basting stitches everywhere are enclosed in the seams. That means my seam allowance was decent. And also making sure there's no holes in these corners down here. That would make sure that all of your stitches met up on the corner when we left that 3/8 of an inch gap. All right, you can put this to the side, and we're going to work on the lining now. Grab your lining side panels, and on the back bottom, draw a 3/4 of an inch line that's parallel to that bottom edge. Grab one of your lining panels and lay it right side up. Grab your side lining panel and lay that right side down with the drawn edge on the bottom of the lining panel, and then just clip along this edge. Go ahead and do the same with the other lining side panel. So when sewing these side panels on, at the very top of your lining panel, you're going to start at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, and as you go down, you're going to increase the size of your seam allowance until you end at a 3/4 inch seam allowance. Once you get to this drawn line, just backstitch and stop. Do the same on both sides of the lining panel. There we go. We now have both side panels attached to one of the lining panels with the seam allowances starting at 3/8 of an inch and then increasing to 3/4 of an inch on the bottom. Grab your remaining lining panel and lay it right sides together with your side panels, making sure that you have the bottom of the lining panel going against the bottom of the other lining panel. And then just clip along these edges. And then sew along these clipped edges in the same manner, starting at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance and increasing to 3/4 of an inch seam allowance. Make sure you stop at these marks on the bottom of the side panel that are 3/4 of an inch above the bottom. Alright, and now we just have to add the bottom panel. We can do that just the same as we did with the exterior, except it'll be easier. Let's start with the longer edges first. So I just pinned one long edge. We're going to start and stop 3/4 of an inch from each edge. We're going to sew at a 3/4 inch seam allowance, and I'm just going to continue and pin and sew the other 3 edges at the sewing machine after I do this one. Alright, once you have all of your seams sewn, we're going to trim down all of these seams to a 1/4 inch seam allowance. If you're using zipper tape for this last zipper, cut it to about 22 inches long. Go ahead and attach your zipper pull if you need to. So first we're going to work on these open ends over here. Line up your zipper and measure in about 1/2 of an inch. Try to make sure if you had to cut your zipper tape, you're measuring a straight line here. And just make a mark right on the edges of your zipper tape, which would be in the seam. On that mark, fold your zipper tape wrong sides together and pinch, and allow those zipper teeth to go up and behind the zipper tape and then clip in place. So you can see these zipper teeth go up and off at a 90-degree angle. Go ahead and do the same on the other side. So this way when you close your zipper, they won't go flying off. Now we're going to base stitch this down to hold this in place. I like to stitch from the middle of the zipper tape up along that edge and just over those teeth on both sides just to hold it in place. So now measure 20 inches from this right angle at the top of your zipper, and you can just mark where that 20-inch mark is and then just cut off your zipper tape. We just don't want this to be longer than 20 inches finished. So now we're going to install this zipper end onto the end of the zipper. In order to do that, you just wrap the zipper tape down to the wrong side of your zipper and then insert it into that zipper end just like that. And then there's a small screw that goes in the bottom, and you just screw that in using jewelry screwdrivers. To help hold it in place, it's good if we add a little bit of glue into the zipper end. So first, fold down your zipper and make sure it fits properly. Once that's done, you can remove it from the zipper end and add just a very small amount of glue on the tip of your zipper and reinsert that zipper end so that it kind of smushes the glue in there. So this should be what you're left with. Now just grab one of these ridiculously tiny screws. These screwdrivers are neat because they're magnetized, so I can grab the screw easily. And then just screw it into the back of the zipper end. If you're having a hard time getting the screw all the way through, take the screw out, grab your stiletto, and then just stick your stiletto into that hole and wiggle it around until you can feel it touching the other end of your zipper end. That way you're making a hole for that screw. Sometimes these screws just can't get through the zipper teeth, but if you use an awl or a stiletto, something to poke a hole in there and make room for it, and then insert your screw, it'll be a lot easier. Go ahead and set your zipper to the side. We're just about to install it. Grab the exterior of your bag with right sides out and measure 2 inches from the seam between the front panel and the side panel in towards the side panel. And I am just going to make a mark with my chalk pencil. We're going to do the same thing on the other side panel. So from the front panel, 2 inches over on the side panel. So now take your zipper and lay it right side down. And we're going to take that curved top edge and clip it to the top of the right side of the exterior panel, lining it up with that chalk mark that's 2 inches away from that seam, and then just go around clipping the zipper in place until we get to the other chalk mark. Make sure you take your straps and fold them down and out of the way. Once we get to the other chalk mark, you want your zipper to veer off, so you want to clip it about 1 inch away from that chalk mark, but then veer it off so that it won't be included in the stitching once we get there. So it needs to be 1/4 inch down, just like that. All right, now we're going to take this to the sewing machine, and using your zipper foot, sew along this clipped edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance. So now once you have this sewn onto one side, unzip your zipper. And we want to sew the zipper in the same way on the other side. So with your zipper unzipped, flip it around so that it's right side up. Flip it over to the other side and flip it around one more time so it's right side down. Once again, we're going to measure 2 inches into the side panel from the seam between the back and the side panel. And then we're going to attach our zipper so that the edge meets that mark, and then just clip it along that edge. All right, once you have it partially clipped, let's go ahead and mark that same 2 inch mark on the other side by the D-ring on the other panel. Once again, 2 inches from that seam into the side panel, and just make a chalk mark or any sort of mark as long as it's in the seam allowance. So we'll just clip the zipper wrong side down against this panel. I think visualizing how this zipper is supposed to go is probably the most difficult part, and I'll give you a close-up in just a minute. So just like before, when we're about 1 inch away from that mark, we're going to have it start veering off so that the zipper does not quite reach that mark on the edge. All right, so let's take a closer look at how your zipper end should look. This is what we have. It's right side up. The zipper tab is right side up. The zipper is right side up. Once you start closing it a little bit, both ends rotate out from the main zipper and flip around so that they are wrong sides against the exterior panel. She has a good picture in the pattern for this if you're still confused. Just like we did previously, we're going to stitch this zipper tape down at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Your zipper should now be attached to the top. Grab your lining wrong side out and unzip that lining pocket completely. This is the hole we're going to birth the entire bag through, so make sure that this is unzipped totally. So now we're going to insert the exterior of our bag right side out into our lining wrong side out. You want to make sure the back panel of your bag is up against that zipper pocket inside your lining. This bag is bigger than the lining, so you are going to have to squish it in there pretty good. All right, once you have the bag in there, you need to make sure your straps are tucked in. So if you can tuck them into one of the exterior pockets, that would be good. You're going to also want to take your zipper end and tuck it in between the exterior of the outer panel and the right side of the lining panel. And now we're just going to match up the side seams. So the side seam for the exterior needs to match up with the side seam from the lining. And just clip those together. Do the other side seam as well. I like to start with all of the seams first, and then I'll clip everything in between them. Now go around and just clip every inch or so around the top of your bag and lining. So once you have this entirely clipped together, we're going to take this back to the sewing machine and sew this together at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. It's helpful if you just try to trace your stitches or go just a little bit further into the bag with the stitches you made on the top for the zipper. It's also easiest if you sew this from the inside of the bag. So lay your bag on the machine with the inside, the foam side up, and just sew along the inside of the bag. This can be slightly heavy, so make sure you use your left hand to hold up the other edge of the bag if you don't have a big table that's helping you hold the bag in place. All right, you did it. You sewed it all together. Now you have to birth it. So open the pocket that's on the inside of the lining, and the zipper should be there. And you're just going to very gently push the exterior through that pocket. Now remember, that pocket has a zipper on it, so if you rip it, you're going to mess up that interior zipper. So be very careful here when you're pushing this out. You have to just go inch by inch here. I would suggest another option to birthing this bag is to just leave a generous opening along the bottom panel of your lining and birth it through there instead of through the zipper. Once you have it all out, make sure you poke out any corners you have in your exterior. And then I also poke out all the corners in the lining. Okay, now we can just go and close up this hole in our pocket. So since we pressed down those bottom edges, it makes it easy to just clip along that fold. And now we can sew along this clipped edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you have that pocket sewn shut, you can just push it back into that zipper pocket. Go ahead and close that zipper. You can push the lining into the bottom of the bag. So now we just need to top stitch around the top of this bag. So you can see that the lining might be rolling over the zipper. Just roll it back, grab some clips, and clip it in place so that the exterior and the lining are wrong sides together and that zipper is poking straight up from both sides. And just go all the way around the bag, really pushing down those seams. All right, now we can just go and top stitch around this entire edge. Make sure you don't include any of the straps in the top stitching and you don't include the zipper. You can top stitch from the lining, but I prefer to be able to see my top stitching and where it's going on the exterior. So if you want to do that, just make sure you remove any extension table you have on your sewing machine so you can really wrap this around the base of your sewing machine as you sew. Okay, the bag portion is now done. If you have a lot of wrinkles or anything, you can iron it or just give it a good steam. Go ahead and set this to the side, and all we have to do is finish up with the backpack straps. So grab your 2 remaining straps, your 2 sliders, and your 4 swivel hooks. Starting with one of the straps, take one of the ends and insert it up through the bottom of the slider and over the top, and let it come out about 1 inch to 1.5 inches, just like this. And I like to just take this to the sewing machine and do a quick top stitch over this middle bar right here, getting as close to the slider as I can. Use your zipper foot to help you. While we're there, let's go ahead and do the same thing with our other strap. So we can just work on these both at the same time. All right, if you'd like to, you can go ahead and add a couple rivets to the strap. So now take one of your straps and hold it wrong side up, stretch it all the way out, grab a swivel hook and lay it pointing down. So when you pull the strap straight, it should go against this folded side by the slider. Insert it into the slider and over. Give yourself a little bit of slack here to work with. So now the swivel hook should be pointing out, the slider should be in the middle, and then you have this end over here. Slide it so that the slider is down. Grab another swivel hook, insert the strap, and fold that edge over about an inch or an inch and a half, just like this. Let's do the same with the other strap. Now I'm going to take these to the sewing machine, and just like I did with that slider, I'm going to sew one line very close to the swivel hook and then another line just going over this top stitching. And for the last step, you can just add a couple more rivets right next to those swivel hooks, just to hold everything in place. And there you go. Your bag is done.
Final reveal. Are you ready for it? This is a good one. Okay, let me just look how cute that is with that beautiful backstitch panel on there. Oh, and these beautiful colors. I just love this backpack. This is such a sweet backpack. I mean, think about it. Think about, you know, a 4th grader or a 7th grader going back to school, kind of nervous. You make them their own custom backpack with some sort of inspirational panel on there. Man, you know, and you can really do a lot with this. Now, I love this bag so much, and I love making it. It's a longer bag to make, but it's so satisfying every step as you see each piece coming together. It's just like, wow, this is incredible. I want to make 1 million of these bags. I have so many ideas. Every single piece of fabric that I love in my stash, I want to use on this bag. I particularly love the idea, many of you are going to know where I'm going with this, as using this as a Parks bag, a Disney bag. Think about it. Red, black, and yellow. Somehow you use red, black, and yellow on this bag, and you have a classic Disney Mickey Mouse bag that's like Disney bounding, right? There's no Mickey on there, but using those colors in a strategic way with this bag, I just love it. I just love the bag. So thank you so much for watching the tutorial today. I hope you make this bag. I really do. I don't care what level of sewer you are. I don't care if you've been doing this forever or you're just starting and this is going to be the first bag you ever make. If you love this bag, give it a try. If it gets frustrating, put it to the side. Come back to it later. This video will be here always. But if you make one of these bags, especially if you make one using my tutorial, will you please tag me on social media, on Facebook, on Instagram, shoot me an email. I'm jessica@OklaRoots.com. Over on the social, I'm @OklaRoots. I just want to see your guys' versions of this. You guys make amazing things. You take these patterns and you take these fabric choices and you just shoot them off to the next level. And I get so inspired watching what you make. You're not going to be surprised to know that these have already been spoken for. I know I'm going to get quite a few of you guys asking to buy them. You know, if I were to sell bags, this would be a bag I would sell. And I don't know anything about selling bags because I don't sell bags. However, I am a buyer, like big time buyer. Like anytime somebody's thinking about how to market something, they're thinking about, will Jessica buy it? Because I would buy so many things. And this is a bag I would buy in a heartbeat. If I saw this at a Disney park store, if I saw this at Target, I would buy this bag. It's just that beautiful. So I hope you have a great rest of the week. Get out there and make something.